The rain came down in thick sheets, blurring the windshield as the wipers worked in slow, tired arcs, and the highway stretched endlessly ahead of us, lit only by the occasional green glow of passing signs and the rhythmic flash of other cars speeding. We were supposed to reach the cabin by nightfall, but the storm had slowed us down, and now we were deep in the middle of nowhere, searching for any place to stop and breathe for a while. He gripped the steering wheel with one hand, the other resting on the gear stick, his forearm flexing with each subtle shift. And I glanced at him too long, too often, trying not to notice the way his jaw tightened, or how his shirt clung to him from the dampness of the air inside the car. Dad, we can't keep driving like this. It's not safe, I said, my voice lower than I meant it to be. And he looked at me, then just a glance, but it was heavy, like he was thinking something he shouldn't. And maybe I was too. We spotted a faded motel sign, barely lit, and barely standing, and pulled in gravel, crunching under the tires, and the air suddenly thick with silence. Only one room left, the old man behind the counter told us, and Dad looked at me, then back at him and said, "We'll take it," his voice rough like he didn't want to argue or think too long about it. The room was small, one bed, cracked mirror, dim light, a single chair by the window, and I felt the air shift the moment the door shut behind us. He stood there in the middle of the room, peeling off his jacket, shaking water from his hair, and I sat at the edge of the bed, feeling the heat rise from my skin, even though the room was cold. He tossed me a dry shirt from his bag, told me to change, and turned around, but his reflection was in the mirror. And I caught him watching as I peeled off my wet clothes and pulled the shirt over my bare skin. It was quiet, too quiet, except for the hum of the old heater and the sound of the rain slapping the window, and his breathing growing heavier as he turned slowly to face me again. The tension was thick, electric, and neither of us moved for a long moment until I stepped toward him just once, and he didn't step back. My hand touched his chest, and he froze, not in rejection, but in restraint, like he was trying to hold something back. And when I looked up at him, his eyes were dark, filled with heat, filled with confusion, filled with everything we weren't supposed to feel. He whispered my name like it hurt to say it, and then his hand was in my hair, his mouth inches from mine, and I should have said no, should have turned away, but instead, I leaned in, closing the distance, until his lips brushed mine, soft at first, then harder, hungrier. Like the storm outside had found its way into us, he backed me against the wall, his hands sliding down my sides, gripping my thighs, lifting me with a strength that made me gasp as my legs wrapped around him, and he pressed into me, heat against heat, through thin layers that burned more than they covered. "Shouldn't be doing this," he said, his voice ragged, but his mouth was on my neck, his hand under my shirt, and I was already trembling, already gone. "Tell me to stop," he said again, breath against my ear, but my hands pulled at his belt, and my lips claimed his, and all the guilt in the world melted under the fire that lit us both from within. The bed creaked under our weight as he laid me down, careful at first, then not at all, his body pressing into mine, and my back's arching into his every inch of skin, burning every touch, forbidden and unstoppable. His mouth trailed down my stomach, slow and hot, and my fingers gripped the sheets as I whispered his name, like a plea, like a curse, like a prayer. That night blurred into shadows and gasps and whispered regrets lost in the dark, a night we never meant to share, but one we couldn't take back. The silence in the room was heavier than the storm had been the night before, and I woke to the faint grey light sneaking through the dusty curtain, falling across his bare shoulder, rising and falling with each slow breath as he lay beside me, one arm still wrapped around my waist, as if even in sleep he didn't want to let go. I stared at the ceiling, trying to breathe, trying to think, but all I could feel was the heat still lingering between my thighs and the ache that reminded me none of. It had been a dream. I shifted slightly, and his hand moved instinctively, pulling me closer, his nose brushing the back of my neck, and I closed my eyes as the memories came flooding back, every touch, every moan, every whispered, "Don't stop," even when we both knew we should. We didn't speak, not at first, not even when he stirred awake, and his fingers slid away, slowly, carefully, like touching me again would burn him, or maybe burn us both. He sat up, swung his legs over the edge of the bed and ran, a hand through his hair, and I could feel the weight in his silence. "We should get back on the road," he said, finally, his voice hoarse and low. And I nodded without turning to face him, because I wasn't sure what I'd see in his eyes, and I wasn't sure what I wanted to see. I got dressed in silence. The shirt he'd given me now wrinkled the air thick with everything we couldn't say, and when he opened the door, the cold morning air hit me like a slap, a cruel reminder of the real world waiting just outside that broken motel room. The drive was quiet, the radio off, his hands tied on the wheel, mine folded in my lap, and every mile felt like a question. We weren't brave enough to ask, "Do you regret it? Do you hate me? Do we pretend it never happened?" Somewhere past the 10th mile marker, he finally spoke, not looking at me, just staring straight ahead. His jaw clenched like it hurt to say the words. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he said, and my heart clenched, because I wanted to ask if he meant he didn't want it, or if he just didn't expect it. But I stayed silent, afraid the answer would destroy me. "But I'm not sorry," he added softer, and that broke me open in a way I wasn't ready for. "Neither am I," I whispered, and he looked at me, then really looked like he saw every truth written on my skin from his touch the night before. We pulled into a gas station, somewhere in the middle of nothing and everything, and as he filled the tank, I leaned back in the seat, watching him, wondering if I'd ever touch him again, wondering if he was wondering the same. That night changed us, not with violence or cruelty, but with a fire that shouldn't have burned, but did. And now every glance, every breath was different. We got back in the car, and this time his hand found mine, resting between us, just for a moment, long enough to say everything we still couldn't speak. The road stretched on ahead of us, winding and endless, and full of things we'd never planned. But that night, that one night, it would never let us go.